for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and as always, it's an honor to be able to stand in the People's House and to talk about the issues that are so important to them. And I appreciate also the opportunity to have had a couple of questions to that previous member who, if I could sum up, basically said, when I questioned what are very legitimate questions about the plan that they have presented to Canadians, they simply say, don't worry about it, just trust us and we'll take care of it, so there's no need to discuss it any further. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, but that's not how democracy works. That's not how this place works. And I would suggest that that's part of the reason that why over the last 9 years of this Liberal government we have seen a litany of failures. A litany of failures on virtually everything that that Prime Minister, that government, and propped up by their coalition partners in the NDP, virtually everything they have tried to accomplish, there is scandal, there is failure, there is a series of broken promises that go along with it. And as a result, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing an erosion of trust in our institutions, outcomes for Canadians being decreased, and at every step of the process, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing that Canadians are worse off today than they were when that Prime Minister was first elected in 2015 on all these fluffy promises with zero substance. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the bill that we have before us, this is simply another example of that. And I would suggest that when it comes to, in fact, I will take us on a little bit of a journey, if you would allow me, Mr. Speaker, because during the 2021 election, the election that the Prime Minister said would not happen but did anyways, and we all know what that is. And then during that election, Conservatives said very clearly that a vote for the Liberal Party was a vote for a coalition. We said that during that election. Yet it was both the Liberals and the NDP said that would never happen. There will be no agreement. There's no chance, is their words, is what they would say. In fact, the media even started criticizing Conservatives for suggesting that that would be the case. Yet it was only a number of months after the election in 2021 where we saw this so-called confidence and supply agreement that is really just a very poorly negotiated coalition agreement. Because what ultimately we see is that the NDP gave away any bargaining power that they could have had in the context of a minority parliament and just gave carte blanche to a Liberal Prime Minister and his government to do with that power what they wanted, and there the NDP are backing them up every step of the way. So then we have seen over the last 2 years or so where the consequence of that is a series of poor public policy outcomes where they stand up and will peacock all day long about the success that they are showing and the work that they're doing for Canadians and whatnot. Yet when you look into the details, you see that it is some of the most shallow policy outcomes that I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, have a very, very small chance of even being actualized when it comes down to it. Because, and the joke that I've heard from a number of constituents, so I'll share it with you, Mr. Speaker, is that George Strait song about having some oceanfront property in Arizona. It's certainly the sort of sale that it seems like those New Democrats would be quick to sell anything, would be quick to buy anything that these Liberals are offering, specifically when it comes to pharmacare. It's very, very relevant to the conversation because it was at the last New Democrat convention where members
Point of order. Member from
Well, I think you need an appropriateness of quoting lyrics, and I like George Strait, but it would be more credible if he was actually accurate. It would be Simon and Garfunkel.
Carry on. Debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, I can assure you that this House nor any Canadian wants to hear me sing. So I will spare both members of this House and Canadians that. But, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that it was when
Point of order.
Point of order is that the member for Timmins James Bay is himself out of order when he raises these irrelevant points about the lyrics. The sole purpose of this is to interrupt the remarks of others. It is shameful. He ought to apologize to the House for his shameful behavior. It's consistently shameful behavior, which is an embarrassment.
Point of order. Timmins James Bay.
Apologize to my honourable colleague that his own backbench is interrupting him while he's trying to make sense of something that is unsensible. No wonder he wants to interrupt.
Kingston in the aisle. Actually, if you want.
Point of order, the Honourable Parliamentary, or the Deputy House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, while in this chamber, it was audible by everybody here. The member from Lanark Frontenac Kingston referred to the member from James Bay as a moron. I would suggest that you would ask that he withdraws that comment because that was extremely unparliamentary. He should apologize as well, too, directly to the member.
The Honourable Member for Lanark Frontenac Kingston.
I welcome the opportunity to withdraw the remarks, and I do deeply apologize to the member for Timmins James Bay, who is indeed the model for decorum for all of us here, who sets the standard for all of us, along with the member from Kingston and the Islands. Who...
Okay, no, I'll accept it as it has been said. So I step out for 2 seconds, and the whole thing goes there. The Honourable Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I find it very interesting that all of a sudden when I start talking about the record and the failures specifically of the NDP, all of a sudden they are quick to cause disorder. Well, I would suggest that it is the embarrassment of their record that truly is what offends those New Democrats and how they seem to be so quick to buy anything that that Liberal Prime Minister is selling. And I will outline specifically why that, the definitive proof of why that is in fact the case, because when those New Democrats late last year had a convention, they drew a line in the sand. It was a line in the sand saying they will get out of that coalition agreement, they will not have confidence in the leader from Burnaby South, that they will say that that is enough, they do not want anything to do with those Liberals and this coalition confidence and supply nonsense if they cannot get the job done. What was the first thing that the leader of the New Democratic Party did, Mr. Speaker? Well, it was he paused. It was he paused and said, well, you know, we need simply more time. We're working out the details of what that might look like. And then there were some very concerning allegations about changing some of the electoral system and whatnot. And then we see that there were some red lines that certainly members of that party talked a lot about how they were going to have this fulsome program that was going to be announced and it was going to solve every Canadian's problem. There was going to be no issues with it. And then what was announced? Well, I would suggest that if you were to catch any of those New Democratic members off camera, they would be sorely disappointed about the work that the member from Burnaby South did in so-called the negotiations that led to the program that we have here today. That covers little, costs lots, and truly has many unanswered questions about whether the benefit will be actualized to Canadians who actually need it. And Mr. Speaker, I think that that is the proof point that this NDP party is interested in nothing more than the photo ops and the illusion that they can have simply a communications plan. And Mr. Speaker, it is truly a sad state of affairs when you have such laziness in the form masquerading as public policy. And I would suggest that this debate that we are having before us, Mr. Speaker, is proof point. And this offends those New Democrats. Well, a party that was built upon an idea that there should be, and in fact, it was interesting because when you look back at the history of the CCF and many involved with that, there was a true desire to see that people, that the social gospel movement is much of the driving force behind the history of why that party even started. Yet they have abandoned those.
Point of order, the Honourable Member from Pickering, Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting that the member opposite seems to be obsessed with the NDP and has not yet spoken on the pharmacare legislation at hand, so I'd ask that he gets irrelevant.
The relevance is a point of order. Actually, it's the best one we had so far today. Let's stick to the bill before us. The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
So, So again, Mr. Speaker, it is interesting how when calling out the failures of the NDP, it not only offends New Democrats, but it offends Liberal members of Parliament. It truly is telling of the level of absurdity that this place has descended into when simply calling out the failures of this so-called confidence and supply agreement, this coalition, this poorly negotiated agreement that has propped up one of the most corrupt governments in Canadian history, and they are so offended when you would even bring forward some things, including talking about some of the history of what built those parties. And to that member specifically, I will be happy to address some of the failures that are specific to the Liberal Party here in short order, but it seems that they don't want to hear those things because they're rather simply offended that somebody would dare question their preeminence. But, Mr. Speaker, it comes down to this. And I'll get into the substance of C-64 here in just a moment, because the context is so important, because it is these Liberals, backed up by those New Democrats, they do not want an opposition in this place. That's why they bought off the NDP. That's why we see so often the Bloc Québécois are quick to go with them. But, Mr. Speaker, they want an audience, not an opposition. And it is a sad state of affairs when it should be in this place, with our long democratic tradition, where we are able to discuss the affairs of the nation, to have those meaningful debates. Yet it is those Liberals that whenever somebody suggests, including the very valid points of criticism, as I have brought forward to the previous Liberal member, that there are concerns about the impact that C-64 will have on the coverage that so many Canadians have, and their response is, just trust us. Well, I'm sorry, but so many Canadians over the last 9 years have communicated with me very, very clearly, and I know many of my colleagues, and I know for a fact that many Liberals are hearing the same thing, because increasingly as I travel across the country, whether it's in airports or in other communities that are in some cases are represented by Liberals, you hear from individuals that are saying they have lost trust in not only the Liberals, but the way that the Liberals, propped up by the NDP, have conducted themselves over the last number of years, have seen an erosion of trust in our institutions. So saying just trust us is not good enough when there is a risk, Mr. Speaker, a real risk that the 97% of Canadians that do have some form of drug coverage currently may be at risk of losing some of those benefits. And, Mr. Speaker, that is a real concern for so many Canadians. We have the circumstances where they promised much and are truly delivering very, very little. And they'll stand up and they'll bluster about how great this is and whatnot. But, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to what Canadians actually need, they are failing to deliver that. And I'll give you a clear proof point on that front. And that has to come with working with provinces. Something that in fact, it was that Prime Minister that was quick recently to brag about going around provinces to deliver his agenda. Yet, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the history and the way that this federation was built, healthcare is provincial jurisdiction. Now, the federal government plays a role in the federal health transfer. And we've seen on that front that there is a litany of failures. In fact, it was that Prime Minister that promised to tear up the previous agreement that would have actually resulted in more funding dollars because it was tagged to inflation than the agreement that Prime Minister went around the backs of different provinces to sign, because he found that he was quick to talk and puff up his chest and say all of these things, yet he hasn't met with premiers since those initial discussions when he said that it was so important to meet with premiers nearly a decade ago. And we are seeing how even different provinces are treated differently. There are some provinces that he seems quick to suggest that they're happy to work with, and other provinces that they may not like the party that those people in that province elected. It's not a conversation around whether they should or shouldn't like a particular political party, Mr. Speaker, but it's that they seem to be quick to dismiss any province that would bring forward legitimate concerns. And when they try to go around, it ends up putting ultimately Canadians and the care that Canadians expect and deserve at risk. There is no question that we need to address some of the challenges when it comes to health care. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why Conservatives have been talking so significantly about some of these things, including making sure that Canadians have access to care, especially at a time when there is a shortage Take, for example, of family doctors. There are so many doctors that are not eligible to work in Canada today because there is no clear process for there to be that recognition. Mr. Speaker, the solution to that is very, very simple. We need leadership that will bring the country together to figure out that path forward so that what could be tens of thousands of doctors could actually get to work delivering the care for Canadians, following that Hippocratic oath that they took when they entered medical school to be able to ensure that they can care for Canadians. And, Mr. Speaker, that would be good news for everybody because it would address a shortage, it would increase productivity, and, Mr. Speaker, one of the challenges, and it's interesting because you don't hear the Liberals talk very much about this, is because we have a massive productivity challenge in our country. And part of the challenge with that is that when you have wait lists, when you have processing times that are taking too long, and this is not limited to healthcare, Mr. Speaker, but everything. So whether it be permitting for houses, whether it be for benefits, you name it, if there's a delay, it has a negative effect on productivity, but it is specifically impacting productivity on our national workforce when it comes to healthcare, because if you have Canadians that are being forced to wait, take, for example, a constituent of mine that waited 3 years for a hip replacement because they were in their 40s. 3 years they waited for a hip replacement because they were in their 40s. And because of the processes in which the hoops that they had to jump through and the productivity that individual, the challenges that they had to stop working, there was family challenges associated with that, Mr. Speaker. And again, these other parties, they don't want to hear some of this stuff because they'd rather simply stand on an empty promise than actually address the real challenges that are facing our constituents. And it's, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to productivity, if we can address some of those things, we will see our national productivity increase, and we will ensure that things like doctor shortages or nurses, it makes sense that if you have a nurse that is trained at an institution, has the training that is required to deliver the quality of care that is acceptable in this country, or, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the proposal that the Leader of the Opposition has brought forward, which that he's coined the Blue Seal Plan, it would give certainty in a process that currently has no certainty. That is just common sense. It would allow somebody who is looking for opportunity, looking for a future, looking to build what used to be known as the Canadian dream that has been so much eroded under these Liberals, there would be certainty. So if that is a physician or a nurse or another healthcare provider, they come to this country, they would have certainty, and what the Leader of the Opposition has talked about, within 60 days they'd be given the thumbs up or thumbs down so they can get to work, or at least know then going forward what upgrading, what training needs to be done so that they can deliver that care that obviously they want to give to Canadians. And because, Mr. Speaker, it is truly a shame that there are so many talented, in many cases immigrants in this country, that are not able to do the work that they trained so hard to do. That is an absolute disgrace. And yet, with some political will, some collaboration, and working with provinces as opposed to pitting them against each other like this Liberal government does on a daily basis, we could see solutions and actual better outcomes for Canadians. Now, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to what we have before us, it talks about, and why the serious concerns that I hear about, and I know many of my colleagues do as well, is that it is the potential impacts of the passing of this bill will be an erosion or outright dismantling of private drug plans. And that includes publicly funded drug plans that are delivered by private companies, as everybody in this place and every public servant, the 400 or so thousand of them, are experiencing, as well as with provincial and other levels of government. So in this process, we have not heard clarity. And now the Liberals will say, oh, we addressed that at committee. Yes, it was asked, the questions were asked, but the answers were not given in any way that would provide certainty. What does this mean? Well, because the bill talks about being single payer, which is either simply fanciful language from those Liberals to appease their coalition partners in the NDP, that means nothing. And then I would suggest that that's just as bad, because then it's abusing the democratic process and just speaks to the poor negotiating tactics of the leader from Burnaby South, which, but we'll leave that because I think that I had addressed that appropriately in the beginning of my speech. But this could practically mean, Mr. Speaker, that private companies will then be changing the way that they deliver those specifics. It puts the employee benefits at risk, including when somebody signs up for a job, when somebody signs a contract for work, the benefit package is a part of the compensation package associated with that. Well, because of what the Liberals are doing and not having done their homework in terms of making sure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, as the saying goes, it could put some of those things at risk, which is could directly impact the ability for Canadians from coast to coast to coast being able to access the drugs that they already have. And what that could mean is from as simple as the pharmacist saying, well, this certain drug isn't covered, but this one is, which can be a huge issue in some cases, or outright not being able to get it covered altogether. And it could scrap coverage plans, and it will force, no question, Canadians on the government plan. And we see this as well when it comes to the dental care plan. And Mr. Speaker, we have yet another example where there's big talk but so little in terms of actual deliverables for Canadians. In fact, it's interesting because when you listen to the Minister of Health, he talks about how many people have signed up for the program, and even last week he said how many people had registered for the potential appointments, and it was the language in which he used was truly a cop-out. So if you want to deliver health care for Canadians, then get to work and work with provinces to ensure that that provincial plans can be complemented and whatnot, but no, that's not what they did. They signed an agreement at what seems like on the back of a napkin to keep the NDP happy, which does not fulfill the promises and the objectives that they so publicly brag about. And the result is that there is the very real potential that outcomes for Canadians will be, when it comes to drug coverage, as we're debating today, when it comes to dental care, as has been and will continue to be debated, when it comes to so many of the other things that these Liberals have promised, the outcomes for Canadians are not better off after these Liberals have tried to fix the problem. So what is the solution, Mr. Speaker, in the minute or so that I have left? Well, I think first and foremost, we need leadership in this country. We need leadership that will bring provinces together to ensure that we can address the challenges that are faced when it comes to making sure Canadians can get the health care that they need. And that includes mental health care. And it's incredibly relevant when it comes to this conversation because, Mr. Speaker, it was that party that promised that there would be a Canada mental health transfer, yet we are now several years into a mandate and that promise has not been delivered on because I guess it wasn't negotiated on the back of a napkin in this confidence and supply agreement. So it speaks to how little they care about the things that ensuring that Canadians have access to the care that they actually need. We need leadership in this country that can ensure that Canadians can access the care that they need so that we can address make sure that every Canadian can, in fact, have those better health outcomes and ensure that the Canadians can once again start to trust the institutions to which we have worked so hard and paid for over multiple generations in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to being able to answer questions on this and ultimately ensure that it's answers that are gotten for Canadians.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Don Valley East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member spoke for 20 minutes, and he spoke about many different subjects, but he still did not have much clarity on a very simple bill. Just so Canadians know, this Pharmacare Act speaks to supplying people with medicine, people who are diabetics, and supplies, and also contraception. So the question I want to ask the member opposite, and you know, he said many different things. He talked about process, but I just want to ask a very simple question. Do you believe that the government should be in a place where they can provide people who have diabetes with medicine and women with contraception? Yes or no? It's a very simple question.
What I believe in and what I don't believe in is not important, but I mean the honourable member for Bell River Crowfoot can answer.
So, Mr. Speaker, if this bill was addressing those things, then so be it. But, Mr. Speaker, there are far more questions than there are answers when it comes to access to drugs that Canadians already have, when it comes to working with provinces. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to ensuring that Canadians have access to the care that they need, this bill, it costs lots, delivers little, and certainly at the rate that the Liberals have expounded upon failure we are seeing that Canadians certainly shouldn't have high expectations when it comes to being able to deliver the bare basics. And Mr. Speaker, I would simply say this. You know, it's interesting when the Liberals peacock about all of their promises, they never talk about deliverables because they have so little to show for all the dollars they've spent.
The honourable member for Montcalm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quebec understood a long time ago that it needed a pharmacare program. The Bloc Québécois, like the National Assembly in Quebec City, unanimously has asked for the right to withdraw full compensation in order to strengthen the existing regime. Simple question for my Conservative colleague. What do the Conservatives propose with regards to pharmacare?
Député de Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think that when it comes to ensuring that's part of the questions that I think Canadians have. They elect provincial governments that are responsible for delivering health care. They expect their federal government to work with provinces. Yet have we seen that? The simple answer is no. We have not. We see a government that is quick to divide, quick to demonize, pit one province, one region against another. And instead of working for the best interests of Canadians, they care more about political wins and photo ops than they do about seeing results. Mr. Speaker, not only are the Liberals a dollar short and a day late, but it's become so very clear that they have no interest in actually ensuring that Canadians have access to the health care that we pay for and deserve. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. These Liberals are failing at it. It's time for leadership at the top to ensure that we can bring accountability and a system that actually works for the best interests of Canadians.
Questions and comments. The member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Conservatives seem to be ideologically opposed to the contraception components of pharmacare. We heard from the member from Peace River Westlock who exposed the Conservative agenda, that they want to end access to reproductive freedoms for women and access to abortion. That has been very, very clear. He spoke out loud, something that seems to be a hidden agenda of Conservatives. And I've been to Camrose, and I've talked to people there, and they've raised the issue of pharmacare. And we know that pharmacare, access to contraception, access to diabetes medication can make a difference of up to $1,000 or $1,500 a month. This is millions of Canadians who need access to these important medications. It's true that this bill just talks about those first two classes of medication, but it's going to make an important difference in the lives of 18,000 people in his riding, the Battle River Crowfoot. When it comes to diabetes medication, 25,000 people in his riding of Battle River Crowfoot when it comes to contraception. So is it because the Conservatives are ideologically opposed to helping people, or are they simply being cruel to the people who are facing that struggle each and every day to pay for their medication and put food on the table?
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that member wants to talk about ideology. Well, that member has abandoned, along with his leader and every single member of that new Democratic Party, has abandoned any resemblance of their ideology that has existed. Because, Mr. Speaker, they have abandoned it for the pursuit of some false perception of power. They claim that they are solving all of these problems, yet when it comes to the actual deliverables for Canadians, he is going to stand in this place and say that he solved the problem when the very people that he is referencing in my constituency, and I know for a fact in his constituency, and all 338 constituencies across this great country, they are not seeing the results that are promised. So, Mr. Speaker, that member propping up that Prime Minister, the NDP and the Liberals, are selling short Canadians on being able to not only access the care that they need, but they are selling them short on the real conversation that needs to take place to ensure that we can have a better healthcare system that actually meets the needs of Canadians, because that member has sold out to a false Liberal agenda that truly is a day late and a dollar short.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Abbotsford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened very carefully to my colleague's speech, and his quite accurate suggestion that there is a massive trust deficit in Canada today. Canadians don't trust their federal government because of the many broken promises that our country is littered with. Perhaps I could ask my colleague to touch on a few more of those proof points that show why it is that Canadians are now so skeptical that this Liberal government with its NDP coalition partners can actually deliver a farmer care program in the first place?
Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question from my colleague from Abbotsford, and know that he was a part of a government, a minister in a government that actually cared about not only making announcements, but ensuring that at every step of the process and the hard work that is actually required to accomplish anything in government, that I know that member and so many others under the previous Conservative government were willing to roll up their sleeves and actually get the job done. There are so many proof points, Mr. Speaker, that it would take days to litigate them all, but Mr. Speaker, I would simply suggest this. When I hear from constituents, a very, very tragic thing. They say that there was a time where they could have respect in the institutions even if they didn't like the government. But increasingly, because of the scandal, because of the broken promises, because of the ego-driven policies of this Liberal government propped up by the sellout NDP, Mr. Speaker, they have lost trust in our institutions more generally. And Mr. Speaker, that is a tragedy, and it's going to take work by Conservatives to ensure that we can repair that trust that has been so damaged by those Liberals and those New Democrats.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And through you, I'd like to ask a question to the member opposite. You talk about losing trust, and I'd like to say that Canadian women have lost trust in the Conservative Party. And the fact that you're standing there now objecting to a program that would give contraceptives to women, when most of your caucus does not want women to have choice when it comes to other issues, for you now to say that we shouldn't be providing contraceptives to 25,000 women in your riding, as well as other women across Canada, is absolutely absurd. So could you please explain whether you support Canadian women or not?
Well, again, I'm not going to explain it. Make sure we don't talk directly to members, but through the chair to the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, how do you know that Liberals are down in the polls? Oh, yeah. How do you know that Liberals are down in the polls? It is because they are going to bring back these divisive issues, Mr. Speaker. They want to play politics as opposed to working for the best interests of Canadians. That member and so many from both the Liberal caucus and the New Democratic caucus, they are terrified about the prospect of not getting their pensions, Mr. Speaker. So they are trying to divide Canadians as opposed to work in their best interest. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has been clear, and Conservatives are here to work for Canadians, and that includes Canadian women.